Many people assume that being the principal's daughter comes with special privileges, but let me set the record straight. It's quite the opposite. Having my dad as the school principal means I have to be on my best behavior, both at home and in school. There are strict rules I must follow. I'm not allowed to go out on school nights. All my homework, including reports and papers, must be completed before dinner, and I can only participate in one extracurricular activity at a time. Usually, my dad suggests things like joining the yearbook club, but what I really want is to be a cheerleader. Unfortunately, he's turned me down twice. But if you think that's challenging, just imagine how awkward it is for any guy who likes me and comes over to my house, only to find himself face-to-face with his own principal. It's quite the ordeal. I'm eagerly looking forward to college, where I can finally be myself. There, people will see me for who I really am, not just as Mr. Gabriella's daughter or the principal's pet, as I'm often called. I've earned that nickname because of an incident that happened when I started high school. No one knew about my family connection to the principal, who's known for his strict disciplinary approach. However, all that changed when my father asked me to stand up during an assembly to introduce myself to the entire school. It didn't go as planned, and I became the butt of a school-wide joke. That's when the nickname Principal's Pet started circulating. As a senior in high school, my typical school day is pretty ordinary now. In a few months, I'll be heading off to college in New York. But for now, I'm still under my dad's watchful eye at home and school, and everyone never lets me forget it. I usually arrive at school around 7:40 in the morning. I prefer to drive myself to avoid being seen with my dad, and it allows me to leave immediately after classes. The less time I spend with him, the better. My friends Eva, Reagan, Gavin, and Zoe always wait for me in the hallway so we can walk to class together. They're a close-knit group, and the twins, Eva and Reagan, are the daughters of our science teacher, Mrs. Bennett. They understand the challenges I face throughout the day at school, knowing that I'm the principal's kid. Gavin has been our friend since the beginning of high school, and Zoe became a part of our group just last year after moving here from Albuquerque. We embraced her, and her impeccable fashion sense ensures we all look great in our group photos. My friends are incredible, and they're the only ones I can truly rely on to make my day enjoyable. We were laughing and having a great time, but just as we turned the corner towards our first period English class, Robert Turner intercepted us. Robert Turner was notorious for being a troublemaker. If he found you attractive, he'd spread rumors about intimate encounters under the bleachers or in the auditorium. If he disliked you, he'd concoct stories about severe STDs or unusual abnormalities to turn people against you. What made matters worse was that he wasn't afraid of my dad. Robert Turner's father was extremely wealthy, and it's likely that he had made sizable contributions to my dad's school over the years. That's probably why Robert always managed to evade punishment for his antics. Now, it seemed like he had set his sights on me. "Hey there, Lucy. How's your morning going?" he asked, casually placing his arm around my shoulders as if to guide me away from my friends. I shot a pleading look over my shoulder, silently asking for help, but they merely stood there, uncertain of what was about to unfold. "Hi, Robert. I've got a class, so I really have to go," I replied, trying to pull away from his grasp, but he held onto my arm firmly. "I don't think your dad would mind if you're a little late," he continued, his grip tightening. I swallowed, hoping this would end quickly. If I just kept quiet and allowed him to talk, maybe I could return to class sooner. "I was hoping you might want to go out on a date this Friday. Perhaps catch a movie and I could treat you to some ice cream." "You know, the whole package," he said, raising an eyebrow. I immediately pushed his hand off my arm and exclaimed, "Absolutely not, 100% no." "What? Lucy, come on. You don't need to worry about your dad," he persisted. "You know I've liked you for 5 years." I scoffed at his remark. "You like everybody," I retorted. "Besides, it doesn't matter if I go out with you or not. You're just going to spread rumors about things that never happened. I don't want that kind of drama. Plus, you're not exactly known for being nice to people. I'd never go out with someone who's such a jerk." He looked genuinely puzzled. "I would never speak ill of you, my darling. You're beautiful, and I don't know where you heard that, but I never badmouth anyone." Robert had a charming appearance, with his blonde hair and blue eyes, making him look like America's sweetheart. But I knew better. He wasn't a good person. You could almost sense it in his eyes if you looked closely enough. I couldn't help but giggle at his response. "Get a life, Robert. I retorted before turning away and heading back to my class just as the bell rang. As I entered the classroom and took my seat, I decided to share the bizarre encounter with Arya. I scribbled a note and passed it to her. It read, "Arya, you won't believe what just happened in the hallway. Robert asked me out on a date, or rather, he told me we're going on a date. What should I do? Lucy." Arya read my note and her gasp left no room for misinterpretation. She quickly jotted down a response, which I eagerly opened and read. "Lucy, are you serious? Tell your dad, tell your mom, shout it from the rooftops that you're not going out with this loser. Arya." I contemplated how I would handle the situation, and an idea began to form in my mind. Little did I know that the day was about to take another unexpected turn. However, as soon as I reached my second period class, I received a summons to the principal's office. Yes, my dad decided to call me over the loudspeaker for everyone to hear, but he didn't use my name, of course. Instead, he declared, and I quote, "My daughter needs to come to the office right now." Given that I was his only daughter and the sole student with that distinction in the school, I knew he was referring to me. My face turned beet red as the eyes of every student in the hallway turned in my direction. Curiosity ran rampant, and I could only hope that Robert hadn't already spread some fabricated tale about us making out before first period. Unfortunately, that seemed like something he would do. I prayed it had nothing to do with him. To say I was a little scared would be a severe understatement. I had never been summoned to the principal's office before, except for the occasional visit to ask my dad a question on behalf of a teacher, or just to say hello. I was quite close to my father. I had never been in trouble at school, and now, I had no idea why I was being summoned. All I knew was that I would find out soon. My next class was math, so missing it didn't bother me much. On my way to the office, I deliberately avoided the hallway where the popular kids congregated. I didn't want anyone to see me walking in that direction. They might ask too many questions or mockingly refer to me as principal's pet, or just PP for short. Upon arriving at the office, my dad walked me inside and closed the door behind us, even sliding the latch into place. He took a seat and gestured for me to sit across from him. Before he could even exchange pleasantries, I blurted out, "Why am I here?" My father chuckled slightly and replied, "I have a proposition for you, Lucy." This morning, Robert's father called me and suggested that if my daughter were to go on a date with his son this Friday night, his company would donate $10,000 toward the construction of the new gym. He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. "Aren't you excited about finally getting the new gym built?" he inquired. I stared at him in complete shock and disgust. "You're forcing me to go on a date with Robert Turner?" I asked incredulously, almost raising my voice. My father leaned back in his chair, exhibiting the demeanor of a seasoned villain, and casually remarked, "Well, Lucy, it's $10,000. That's a substantial sum of money," my father continued, a stern tone in his voice. "Xavier Turner is a formidable and influential man, capable of affecting both our lives significantly. I would strongly advise you to go on this date and maintain a pleasant demeanor throughout." He concluded with a dismissive tone, "Now get out of my office. I don't want to hear another word about this." Reluctantly, I got up to leave, feeling a mixture of frustration and disappointment at my father's stance. It was no surprise, he always had to have the last word. As I exited his office, I couldn't help but think about how he had talked to me. But then again, I shouldn't have expected anything different. As I left the office, I took a turn down one of the school's dimly lit hallways. There was something eerie about this corridor, which housed the band room and chemistry lab, but it had an even cooler secret: the janitor's office at the end of the hall. The janitor's closet was a place only I had the key to. I had swiped it from my dad's keychain a long time ago, and my friends and I had been using it as a hideout whenever we wanted to skip class for as long as I could remember. I had the impulse to send a quick text to my friends to let them know I was heading to our secret hangout. Fortunately, Eva, Zoe, and Gavin could sneak out of their classes to join me. Reagan, on the other hand, was taking an important test she had been studying for intensively, so we didn't want to disturb her. You might be wondering whether I ever worried about getting caught or facing consequences for skipping class. In short, the answer was no. Over time, I had become adept at knowing which teachers paid no mind to students leaving class, and if I ever did get caught, I could always use the excuse that I was talking to my dad, a privilege that came with being the principal's daughter. I rather enjoyed having that kind of leverage. Soon after sending the text, I heard our familiar secret knock on the door. The signal, 3 short taps followed by 2 long ones, echoed through the door. I responded with a quick tap to confirm that I was inside and ready to turn on the lights as soon as they entered. We had a rule to keep the lights off when the door was open, ensuring no one would suspect anything peculiar happening in that dimly lit corridor. The door swung open, revealing Gavin's eager face. I could tell she was burning with curiosity about what transpired during my visit to the principal's office, but I held off on sharing the details until the others arrived. When the remaining girls joined us, there was a brief moment of silence, quickly shattered by a cacophony of voices speaking all at once. Zoe finally restored order, urging us to take turns to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Gavin looked at me, prompting me to start. With a deep breath, I began. Robert asked me out. The unanimous response was a collective, "You," uttered simultaneously, even from Arya. I nodded in agreement. I know, but that's not even the worst part. I was summoned to my dad's office, and he's forcing me to go out with him on Friday, for 10 grand. A heavy silence enveloped the room. Arya eventually broke it with a nonchalant remark. "Well, I mean, last time it was 5 grand, so you're getting more expensive." She playfully nudged my shoulder to indicate she was joking. I groaned in frustration, wondering aloud, what am I going to do? Eva chimed in with a mischievous grin. "There's only one thing you can do. Go on the date with him and make him so miserable that he'll be begging his dad to pay your dad 50 grand to keep you away from him." I couldn't help but smile at the suggestion. Despite my complaints about being the principal's daughter, it did come with some advantages, like knowing the school's security system inside out. Additionally, I had access to every key, granting me entry into any room, including the school itself. My dad kept the master keys in a lockbox inside his closet, and I had a plan to retrieve them after school to finally put Robert Turner in his place. The remainder of the school day flew by, and we gathered more girls to explain our strategy, taking some time during lunch to create flyers. We needed to enlist as many people as possible to make our plan work. It wasn't going to be a walk in the park, and we'd require substantial assistance. I had a hunch that the girls we were recruiting would be eager to help, and would even bring in more recruits. Once I got home, I diligently completed all my homework and made a point of taking a shower, making it seem like I was getting ready for bed. Little did my parents know that earlier that day, I had arranged for Robert Turner to meet me at the school after dark. I had told him I wanted him to prove his feelings for me by meeting me there. It didn't take much persuasion, probably because Robert believed we were at least going to share a romantic moment. What he didn't know was that I had invited over 100 girls from our school, and he was in for a significant surprise when he arrived at the auditorium. Now, all I had to do was wait for my parents to fall asleep so I could break into my father's lockbox. My initial plan had been to retrieve the keys after school, but my dad's meetings had delayed him, and he didn't return home until around 6:30. He seemed unusually perceptive today, almost as if he suspected I was up to something. My parents typically went to bed by 9 p.m., but tonight The Bachelor was airing, and it was my mom's favorite show. I had completely forgotten about it, so I endured the agonizing hour-long wait for them to finally switch off the TV and retire to bed. An additional 20 minutes passed before I could hear my dad's snores drifting down the hallway, and another 5 minutes before I carefully entered their closet. I knew where the lockbox was, but the location of the key was a mystery. I turned on the flashlight on my cell phone and rummaged through pens, pencils, loose change, and various other odds and ends scattered on the dresser and within the closet. However, there was no sign of the key. I glanced over at the lockbox, and luck was on my side. The key was still inside it. I turned it swiftly, pulled out a large keyring, and it jingled like cymbals. For a moment, I was convinced that I had awoken both my parents, as they stirred slightly. However, I managed to stuff the keys into the pocket of my hoodie and dampen the sound. I quietly slipped out of their room and hurried down the stairs. I had to reach the school by 11 p.m. before people started leaving. I quickly sent a text to Gavin, informing her that I was en route and hoping she could relay the message to everyone that I'd arrive shortly. Simultaneously, I messaged Robert, letting him know I was on my way and that I'd meet him by the auditorium doors. My aim was to ensure he didn't notice anyone entering or hear about the real plan. We had distributed flyers during the school day, instructing people to pass them on only to other girls and to keep everything confidential. However, high schools being what they are, Secrets rarely stay that way. I pulled into the school parking lot, relieved to see that most people had parked on the other side, hidden from Robert's view as he approached. Given the size of our school, the other side of the parking lot was completely out of sight. Now, I just needed to ensure everything was in order before Robert arrived. I texted Robert to inquire about his arrival time, and he replied that he'd be there in 5 minutes. Perfect. I hurried into the school building, and to my astonishment, when I opened the auditorium doors, there weren't 100 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Instead, the entire auditorium was filled with girls, some holding signs with words Robert had used to insult them, while others wore shirts with those words emblazoned on them. Zoe had her camera ready. My jaw dropped. I had never seen so many people in a single room before. Surprisingly, everyone remained silent. It was at that moment that I decided to break the silence. I expressed my gratitude for their presence and reminded them to be prepared, because Robert would be arriving soon. Just as we saw headlights approaching down the street, the lights in the auditorium were extinguished. It was nearing 11:30, and there weren't many vehicles on the road at that hour, so we were fairly certain it was him. True to our expectations, he pulled into the parking lot and parked right next to the entrance. He looked freshly showered and appeared eager to meet a cute girl. Little did he know that the moment he pushed those auditorium doors open, the lights would blaze to life, and over 600 girls would unleash a simultaneous roar, repeating the derogatory words he had used against them. Some girls started throwing objects at him, a behavior we hadn't encouraged. Others even fired Nerf gun darts at him, a move I secretly wished I had suggested. The smirk on Robert's face vanished the instant he took in the sea of people before him. He made a hasty retreat, but Reagan and Aria blocked the exit with their arms crossed. I positioned myself in front of Robert, staring him down while 1,000 girls stood behind me. "Every single girl in this room is someone you've personally hurt," I declared. "The fact that we managed to gather so many women in one room should demonstrate how much your words and actions can destroy people. Believe me, none of us will ever date you." I had more to say, but just as I was about to continue, the alarm blared, and red lights began flashing throughout the auditorium. We all covered our ears, including Robert and the door blockers. Within 5 minutes, the police arrived at the doors, along with my dad. I thought, crap, as I noticed his piercing gaze fixed on all of us through the glass. The doors swung open, and my dad rushed into the room, demanding, "What the hell is going on?" He glanced at me, then at Robert and everyone else present. "Dad, these are my friends," I explained, gesturing to the room filled with individuals who had come together to confront Robert Turner and his hurtful behavior. "I don't want to go out with him, and I certainly don't want you to accept $10,000 from his father just to show off your school. This ends today," my dad declared. He rubbed his head and glanced at the police officers. "I don't know what she's talking about," he continued, shrugging his shoulders. One of the cops fixed his gaze on my father. "So, you're telling me 1,000 high school girls gathered to tell a bully he's a jerk?" We all nodded. The cop's face broke into a broad grin, and he said, "All right." Clearing his throat, he posed another question. "One more thing. Did you mention that your father accepted bribes from Nathan Turner?" Once again, we all nodded. "Mr. Gabriella, you are under arrest for extortion," the cop announced, reciting my dad's rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Following that day, I became somewhat of a legend. My dad faced severe consequences for accepting money from Nathan Turner, and Mr. Turner found himself behind bars. My dad lost his job as the school's principal, but there was a silver lining to the whole ordeal. He was no longer the principal, and when he wasn't stressed out, he proved to be a pretty cool dad. That didn't mean he didn't get really mad at me, but I explained to him why Aria, Zoe, Reagan, and everyone else and I did what we did. It wasn't about rebellion or getting someone into trouble. It was about standing up for ourselves and others.